Now, National Cabinet will meet for a second time next week as pressures grow on fuel supplies, with the effects spreading way beyond the Bowser. It's also raised more questions about not only Australia's ability to fend for itself when it comes to sovereign capability, but also when it comes to security. And for more on this, we're joined by the former Prime Minister Malcolm Turnbull, who has of course been speaking publicly about these issues for some time. Malcolm, welcome back to News Breakfast.
Yeah, great to be with you.
Now, we'll get to some of the domestic issues in a moment, but I just wanted to take you to what's happened overnight. Donald Trump has again criticised allies, including Australia, saying Australia has not been great regarding his war in Iran. How do you think the government should be responding to these kind of criticisms?
Well, look, the government's probably going to let it go through to the keeper, but because they don't want to get into a verbal slanging match with Donald Trump. But they've been absolutely right, as have other allies, in not getting involved. For a start, they weren't consulted. This is a war that Israel and America chose to start. They didn't have to do it. They've started it, and the consequences have been enormous for the whole world. But remember this, the Iranian tactic, they are the weaker party, is to horizontally escalate the conflict. So that's why they're bringing in other countries, attacking their Gulf neighbours, attacking their assets, their economic infrastructure and so forth. If more countries get involved, all that does is increase the horizontal escalation, right? And that's what the Iranians want, because what they're doing is, from a position of great weakness, they're increasing the cost of the war to Trump and putting him in the position where he may have to put boots on the ground. Now, once he does that, of course, there will be American casualties. The implications for that for him in his domestic politics are massive. I mean, this is a guy who ran for president on the promise that there would be no more wars. He was the huge critic of the Iraq war in 2003, and he's absolutely slammed America's endless wars in the Middle East. The people closest to him, like J.D. Vance, like Elbridge Colby, on national security, are absolutely opposed to this war. So he's dividing his own political party. And so if the Iranians keep raising the cost of this war, they're really undermining Trump where he is most vulnerable, which is in the domestic American political environment.
There has been this speculation that some sort of ceasefire can be done. It's difficult to say how close that is. Donald Trump is saying Iran wants a deal. Iran says at the moment it doesn't, and there's been a lot of back and forth. If some sort of agreement can be reached around the Strait of Hormuz, do you think Australia should be playing any role at all in keeping it secure?
Well, Australia's offered with other allied countries to play a role once the conflict is stopped, and I mean that would make sense, I guess. But you've really got to ask yourself how is it possible to have a negotiated settlement to this war in circumstances where Trump has twice attacked Iran in the course of negotiating with Iran, right? He is a leader who believes, and makes no bones about it, that might is right. So the Iranians would need an enormous amount of reassurance to agree to any ceasefire. And so, there will be people in America and certainly in Israel that will be saying to Trump, the only way to deal with this is to absolutely flatten the Iranians, and that means sending the forces into Iran, boots on the ground. But then you've got Iraq potentially a second Iraq war, but one with a much bigger and more complex and more united country.
You've been talking for a long time now and saying that Australia should have a more independent foreign policy, especially when it comes to the AUKUS deal, which you've been clear you think is a dud. I think some viewers might agree with you this morning, some won't. But if we were to get rid of AUKUS, what should Australia be spending money on, do you think, to become more independent, to defend itself if we were to go down this path?
Well, we should be spending money on capabilities that are sovereign. I mean, sovereignty matters. I mean, that the tragedy of AUKUS is that it made us vastly more dependent on the United States at a time when the United States was becoming vastly less dependable. And, I had having a conference today in Canberra with David Kilcullen, It's a similar format to the one I held last year on this point, sovereignty and security. I mean, our Parliament is basically gaslighting the Australian people because we're not hearing our political leaders talking about these issues of sovereignty and our security other than with sort of, bland assurances that AUKUS will be the solution. I mean, the reality is we are very unlikely to get any submarines at all. We're very unlikely, and we're certain not to get them for many, many years, for well into the next decade at the earliest. And so we should be buying and capabilities, whether they are submarines that we build ourselves, such as the ones we're working on with France, or other long-range strike capabilities that enable us to defend Australia ourselves. I mean, sovereignty matters. I mean, the tragedy of AUKUS and, frankly, much of our national security policy since the Morrison government has been a constant sacrifice of sovereignty for the sake of security. But in reality, we're going to end up losing both. So we have to be able to stand on our own 2 feet. I mean, this is, if ever there's one message that comes out of these events at the moment, it is sovereignty, self-resilience, independence, patriotism. We've got to get off our knees.
Yes, and we should just point out we had the Defence Minister Richard Marles on the show earlier. He has repeatedly said he's confident that we will get the submarines, but no doubt that debate will continue. Just before I let you go, Malcolm...
He keeps saying that, but there is no basis in fact for his confidence.
OK. Just finally, before I let you go, One Nation outpolled the Liberal Party in South Australia at the weekend. When you look at the landscape at the moment of Australian politics, do you think the federal Liberal Party can ward off the threat of Pauline Hanson and Barnaby Joyce?
Well, they can do so, but they've got to get back to the centre. They've got to start sounding like the Liberal Party ought to be sounding, which is talking about the economy, talking about tax, talking about productivity. I mean, the Liberal Party's great strength, really its only real comparative strength, is on economic management. And unless they're focused on those issues, as opposed to the culture war issues that fire up the audiences who watch Sky News and read the Murdoch press, if they focus on the economy, then people will start listening to them again. Australian politics is determined at the centre. And unfortunately, at the moment, and this is unfortunate for everyone because we need a viable opposition, the only major political party that is operating at the centre of Australian politics is the Labor Party. The Liberal Party has become like a National Party light, chasing One Nation down that right-wing populist burrow, and all they're doing, by doing that, is enhancing the credibility of One Nation. I mean, it is a terrible abdication of responsibility to be a viable, electable opposition.
Malcolm Turnbull, thanks for joining News Breakfast today.
Thank you.